So, what holds us back from being the leader and difference maker that we're capable of? Our guest today is Adrian Koehler. He is a leadership engagement expert and the senior partner of an executive coaching firm, Take New Ground. He coaches executives and entrepreneurs in the art of science and leadership. And what I love about him is that he thrives in extreme environments and find comforts in difficult conversations. And today we are going to talk about why there is no such thing as fearless leadership, how to have difficult conversations, and how those conversations start with the conversation we have with ourselves. So I'm really excited to bring him to you. Adrian, welcome to Leaders Transformation.
Nicole, so happy to be here.
Well, it is great to have you. And man, we've been having such a great conversation. I feel like we should have hit record about 30 minutes ago. So, but let's start off with just a little backstory on you. You've got some incredible experience in this area of transformation in your own life and the things you've been doing. So tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I've been in, when people ask me how long I've been doing, I'm like, I've been doing it this way for about a dozen years. But I feel like as soon as I was thinking, I don't know, I'm like a teenager, entering adolescence. I just wanted to figure out how life worked. I wanted people to get along. I wanted, I was an athlete, so I always wanted like excellence and was trained in that. So the environment of coaching, or like all the conversations that are coaching. I mean, I remember early on, like, man, I could tell. First off, I was always kind of an anxious kid, like some kind of striving notion inside of me, like never quite comfortable this with. And I experienced that when I was leading, I calmed down. When I was leading, like I engaged deeper with other people. And it's like, okay, so leadership became like an arena to really showcase, become myself. So I've always been drawn to leaders. I wanted to learn from leaders. I wanted to be a leader early throughout all the transitions. But that meant growing up in a really small town. Parents both school teachers, awesome salt of the earth type folks, leaders in the local church. And anyway, really great. I joked that I was raised in an episode of Friday Night Lights. That was kind of like that was my upbringing. I'm the youngest of two boys. My dad's a high school history teacher and coached every sport anyway. But my dad also went to the high school he taught at for 35 years. So very stay close to home mentality there, which I honor. Don't do, but I honor it. I've always been the one that wanted to get away. So anyway, grew up in that small town, ended up getting to go play ball in college and didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, my own spiritual life, which I'd put on the shelf for a while. It came back, and was really dominated me with the possibility of I guess the mission of Jesus. So I was captured by that, meaning like, what do you want to be involved with in the world? You can go like spend your days, or you can be a change maker. You can like be a part of I think the greatest narrative ever, which is the reconciliation of all things, to bring things back in order, to realign them, to repurpose them, to amalgamate, and then have something beautiful happen out of that. That's for me the most exciting thing. That's the invitation of Christianity for me, is to be involved that way. And so I was captured by that, and I was like, what am I going to do with my life? I can go travel the world. I knew I liked travel. I knew I liked diversity. I loved variety. And, my brain worked for the medical. I'd taken every biological science class I could take, and I just loved it. I dug it, and my brain remembers stuff pretty easily. And, but I didn't want to go be a doctor because it's like 7 years in school. Then you got to go like work in a hospital for, anyway. And I'm not that objective. I'm like a in the trenches type. I mean, I can appreciate a good strategy session, but what's really happening? So anyway, my serendipitously or providentially, my roommate in college, his father was an ER nurse in Gary, Indiana. So in the midst of it, in like pretty heated battle, and I thought, this is cool. I could do that. So I shifted over, got a nursing major in college. Thoughts I'd go like start clinics in Saudi Arabia or something. I figured it was a ticket anywhere around the globe that I wanted to go or felt called to go or whatever. And Anyway, but worked at a children's hospital in Chicago right after undergrad. Chased a girl, of course. Chased a girl to Chicago. Started working in the pediatrics intensive care, which was just such an honor, such an honor. Very exciting to be involved in because a life is on the brink, and it's a 5-year-old kid with these types of situations, and no kid deserves anything like that. So you just get to go fight for life, for the child, and that's a very fascinating, fast-paced game for like a very type A, get in there and throw some elbows type guy. Um, but there's the kid, and then there's the family unit that they're all having the worst day they've ever had in their entire life, and they go to their natural corners of whatever dysfunction comes to the surface. When you apply pressure to something, it purifies the thing, and that means all the shit's coming to the surface. We see that at most of my executive offsites now, but at the bedside then, um, to get to be a part of helping a mom be in the real conversation and knowing what to do, and it's going to be okay, and being that opening for them for education and connection. And typically moms would be controlling and loud, and dads would be angry and quiet. That's the kind of the typical experience. But anyway, loved the opportunity to get to bring people together and educate and advocate and all that, but also just like creating space for people to talk through what they would rather, or they might feel compelled to just stuff down. But speaking when you don't want to speak is usually good for the soul. So anyway, that's how I started out of college. That's what I did. And during that process, I was involved in a local church in Chicago, and I was like the music guy and all that. And I was on a group. Didn't lead the group, on a group that went to India. And prep for that trip, they gave us this CD. Remember those? They gave us this CD with this speech, this talk, this sermon by this guy named Erwin McManus. And I didn't listen. I was 23. I didn't follow instructions and listen to the CD before the trip. But I'm in India, listening on a Walkman, trying to take a nap, and I turned this on. And this talk was called "The Barbarian Way Out of Civilization." And I heard this talk, and I thought, I've never heard anybody see the work of God like that. And I don't know who this guy is, but I'm going to get to know him. Came back from India, read all of Erwin's books. I'll leave a lot of details out about how we ended up happening, but 6 months later, I'm living in Los Angeles and starting an internship. The first ever internship that was there, that was formalized, called the Barbarian Way. Anyway, something like that. So anyway, came out to Mosaic. Mosaic was at a wonderful time in its growth and expansion, and I was a part of that internship. And then they started this thing called the Protege program, which was like a 21-month go back to school and get a master's degree, but most importantly, go build something at Mosaic. So anyway, so I jumped right in and did that for a couple of years, mostly in working with college students, and it was awesome. And it was entrepreneurial. There was like nobody. There's anyway, at 5 different schools, smaller schools in LA. So just building community. So helping strangers become friends. These are some themes that, have popped up throughout my life, like that aren't accidental. But that skill, like creating calm in the storm, having, strangers become friends. And anyway, loved that era of my life, and ended up creating this thing called Serve LA. And I was like building teams and mobilizing teams into service in Los Angeles, and then taking a lot of teams overseas. Like when, for example, when Haiti would happen, they'd call me and, Adrian, what are we going to do? When the earthquake happened, what are we going to do? And I don't know, I'll figure it out. And so I was like the guy that would, in the middle of, uncertainty, pull people together, mobilize towards a vision. So these are all things that like got in my bones. They were in my bones, I think, from the beginning, but then they got expressed and honed and bettered and championed and believed in, and all that stuff was happening. And it was really such a wonderful era in my life. About a 3,000 person church. And so I'd speak, I don't know, I'd speak 4 or 5 times a year, and I'd travel internationally and go speak at conferences because everybody wanted Erwin, and Erwin didn't want to go to all of them. So he'd send punks like me to go speak. So anyway, really blessed that all that happened and that I was chosen for that. And really blessed that I said yes and got involved early. So through that, though, I helped a guy in his own spiritual life. His dad's a billionaire. So he was a millionaire just because he was born. And through his own spiritual transformation, and it's an amazing story that if we had 20 minutes, I'd tell it to you. But anyway, through his own spiritual transformation, wanted to give half that money away. So put together a foundation. He said, "Would you help me figure that out?" And I thought, "Oh, that would be great." But it was hard to leave the $30,000 a year salary at Mosaic. That was really hard. I had to pray about that. But put together a real salary, and then got to help him figure out what he wanted to do in the world. So took him around everywhere, all over the globe, with organizations and issues and leaders that I knew well and trusted that they could, make a difference in all these different domains. But he ended up falling in love with what we ended up focusing on was like giving people a second chance who have really blown it. So that meant we did, Homeboy Industries in downtown LA was our first organization we invested in. And we put a cafe for them in City Hall, which was awesome. And then we ended up doing most of our work in prison. And so my first coaching clients were murderers, which was like very thrilling and frightening. And then, but we do these 3-day leadership trainings. Then we took this group of lifers and then trained them to be trainers. And that work is still happening. And that's probably, oh man, that's like 10 years ago now. And that work's still happening, even with 4 new wardens, which just never happens. When a warden comes in, they wipe the decks and take off all the programs and start fresh. Not this program. They call it Ready for Life. That's still going on. So it's amazing. So all these guys that we trained initially are getting out of prison and making a difference and re-entering their world. A lot of which are involved in organizations that we trained. So anyway, they keep involved in the work and keep giving back. And if anybody, I don't know if anybody on this that's listening to this has ever met Dan Tocchini, but Dan's a business partner of mine, and he is compelling. Anyway, a lot of them stay close and want to be involved in organizations that we're involved with, take new ground. Plus, when Dan's involved, it's like Papa's around. So I did that and love that. I love that work with this foundation. And I wanted to do really ambitious things with it. Good news, hard news at the time. The guy that invested the money wanted to just focus on that one prison, working with that one population, which is like great. And it's his money. So yes, good for you. I want to go change the world, or I want to go at least, we could go to the White House. We can write laws, if you've got a fresh vision and money to back it and the manpower to show it and the proof, the data sets to show, if they go through our training, which is true. Dan did these trainings, dozens of engagements on the East Coast in Lynn, Massachusetts, with a ministry called Straight Ahead. And they have found in their studies that if a recidivism rate, which is the chance that people are going to go back to prison, that is at standing 87%. If you're in prison, 87 of the 100 of you will be back in prison even after you get out. That's standard. That's what happens because prisons are criminal factories. Train them to become more criminal. Unless they come to the Ready for Life program. But they, after going through our training, that jumped down to 12%.
Wow.
So breathtaking work. All I'm saying is the breathtaking work. It's all from the mind, heart, spirit of Dan Tocchini. And so people that get out really want to be involved, which is wonderful. We have a coaches academy, or the leadership academy, that teaches leaders how to coach well. And we just had a first weekend, and one of the guys got out and came in and shared his story, and just, the room was floored with what this guy's been through and how he sounds now. Because you're like, hold on, all that, and this is the guy I'm talking to now. Like, I'd trust you with my kids, anyway, that type of transformation. So we get to do that now inside of companies, which is so thrilling for us. We've focused in for the last 3 years. It was during COVID, we got serious about it. We were like focused in on founder driven companies, for a handful of reasons, mostly because it's most interesting. No, I'm not going to put these in order. It's really interesting. And we know we can make a major difference. Because if I shift a founder, I shift everything. Because
Yes.
people are culture, right? Like, I am a
Yes.
culture. Like, I am a natural set of conversations in the world, permissions and omissions and things I'm excited about and things I don't have room for, generate mood around me. We're all culture, and people get around us. So founders are always very brilliant people, ambitious, and hard charging if they're successful founders, I guess. If they're all that, and all my clients are just like that, and blind as a bat when it comes to relationships, like, anyway, dysfunctional just like every human, but it's tough. Anyway, there's lots of, we can get into it if we want to. I know you've got a lot of thoughts about life cycle of a business. We talked about that a little bit, but there's all these moments in time for founders, which is extreme for them and very common, but they don't know it's common. They just think they're like uniquely suffering, which I think is one of the biggest lies for humanity, that we're suffering and we're alone. And it's like lonely at the top is what we called it, and got all proud of it as leaders. Like, it's lonely at the top. Why do you like it that way? Is the question I always ask people. Because they speak as if lonely at the top is an inevitability. And of course, there are tensions in leadership that generate the possibility for isolation. But it doesn't have to be that way. But almost everybody I know, and even me in different phases of my life, when I was struggling, I'd rather struggle in silence. Because there's this mythology about, like, if I show the insecurities that I really live in, that I really have, if I show those, people will respect me less. And it's always the opposite. Is that I say, for the first thing, if once a leader has an epiphany, he's the last one to the party. Everybody else knows what's going on. He or she, everyone else knows what's going on. So once you have an epiphany, you're the last one to that party. So, if they're in that process, and anyway, it's just big, huge opportunities for them.
Wow. Adrian, there's so much there to unpack.
Yeah.
And I know we're not good because we spent so much time talking beforehand. We only have about another 10 minutes or so.
Yeah.
You know what I heard in all of that, and it's such an incredible opportunity. I love how God works in terms of giving us experiences, and we can look at those experiences like setbacks, or this happened to me, and or that we say no because we're afraid. And I heard in that several things, but one of the things I heard was you just said yes. And which leads me to the second thing, which is about the real conversations. Transformation happens in the real conversations. And so in all of those instances, what was common is having the real conversation about, like you said, about the vulnerability, the authenticity of just realizing that, you know what, I don't have all the answers. I don't know it all. I'm not alone. And what I believe is driving my behavior. And it's just, it's so incredible when you think about, like you said, people look at this guy and go, how is he, this guy had gone through all that? Yeah, because his past didn't have to equal his future. That was a choice. But first of all, we have to be aware of that choice, and then we can do something with that choice. So I'd love to hear, kind of like, when we talk about having those difficult conversations, how do you open up the door for those difficult conversations when maybe somebody has been, or we are the somebody, right? Where we're just going in, like, we think we know, and we don't know that we don't know. And now you're coming in as a coach and saying, hey, what about this? How do you open up that conversation to get people? Because there's a defining moment. There was a defining moment in your life when you said you heard Erwin McManus, who I've been to Mosaic when I lived in LA. I actually visited there, and really really cool. And then for me, even like I talked about Dan Tocchini prior to, earlier when we were talking, is that when I heard Dan Tocchini speak, and I was like, now that's different. There's
Yep.
defining moments in our life, and I
Right.
believe that this is a defining moment, having that real conversation.
Oh, yeah. Well, great question. Like, how do you open up these conversations? So, first off, let me get a couple principles out that I think baked into what I'm going to say, but I want to illuminate what I'm thinking and what naturally hits me so we don't miss a couple steps. One is one of my convictions about humanity is that our souls want to be healthy. That there's a part
I
of
agree with
us
that.
deep
Yeah.
down, like inside of us, every single human, and I don't care what they believe about anything or anyone or whatever, um, our souls are crafted for health. So when I say, how do we open up these conversations? Well, it's good as the coach to be honest or be clear about what I'm believing. So souls want to be healthy. All that to say, there is trouble and there's stress that's happening right now, and so it stands at contest with what I want. And most people want peace. They want alignment. They want connection, even though we do a whole bunch of other stuff to try to usually protect ourselves from the inevitable suffering and betrayal in the world and all that. But we want to be connected. We want to be vulnerable. We want to trust people at our core. We learn other things, but we want it to be that way. We want it to feel the safety, people would say, to feel that way. We think that's really dangerous and wonderfully dangerous. So all that to say is, like, people are in a conversation about how bad it is, and they're usually only thinking about how bad it is and how much they want it to be over and who's at fault, and usually not them, and it's someone else. And they're in that conversation about what's happening instead of what do I really want?
Yeah.
And what would blow my mind? Like, what am I even so cynical now? I'm unwilling to speak. So if I can help, this is how I open up the conversation. I want to hear what their vision is, and what when they started the company, what did you want it to be like? Like, what did you think a great leadership team would be? I want them to get reconnected to their own vision, number one, and that sets the bar out. That usually also generates a ton of despair, because current reality is so distinct from the future state they want. So we usually don't dream because it will generate despair in a vacuum in the moment we're in now. But I do that with them. And I know what's happening. They don't. I have language for what's happening because they want to resist it, and I can give them language for what they're just experiencing. So once that despair is high, and you play out this glorious future, and then you talk about how things are now, and then you ask the question something like, well, if you don't do anything new, how bad's it going to get in a year? And let them sink into that horrible hell about if I don't. So here's how what I really wanted it to be. Here's how it is now, and then I want to play out worst case scenario, because that's just true. It happens to be a great sales tactic, but it's also just true. Like, if they don't do anything new, it will get this bad.
Yeah.
So, so then the person in the moment is hit with an invitation. Do I want to make decisions now that my future self will thank me for? Or do I want to make decisions now that the future self will be ashamed of? Like, that's a crossroads. And if they want to take the heroic stance and stand for the future, then let's talk, then we go in deeper. And then, because now there's meaning in it. Now there's purpose in it. Now there's a much deeper sense of ownership in the leader. Because I'm always quick to tell them, hey, whatever you've got, you've either generated or you've allowed. That's it. Nothing else is happening, especially if you're the leader. I would say
Yes.
that for every human. But if it's my organization, so if I examine, if I guess people are listening couldn't see my hand gestures, but if it's my organization, there's no place to hide in that conversation. And thank God, because I can learn a ton if I decide, okay, how have I contributed to the hell we're experiencing? how have I contributed?
Yeah.
Even if I've got a big sob story about what else has happened circumstantially, but how have I contributed? And then people are free.
Yeah.
Um, Same conversation we'd have with murderers in prison, because we'd always say, "You want to be in prison?" They'd say, "No, I don't want to be in prison." I'm like, well, you're here. So physical reality is testifying to something else. So let's talk about, why you wanted to be here, and what you, and not only what you did, but talked about what justified you doing it. And
Yeah.
once they get that, if they're willing to get that, we do this big exercise called victim responsible. If they shift from that victim mindset to a responsible mindset, the whole world's brand new, because they haven't looked at it that way. And all of a sudden they have tons of power and insight and commitment to other people. Other people show up, whenever I am responsible. So that's how I open up those conversations. People are dying to have them. They are also dying without power because they're victimy and they don't believe in themselves. And but part of I guess the juice here, when I say the art and science of leadership, there's some art to this. And usually hard driving type A's tell themselves they don't do this part well, but it's just vulnerable to do it well. So, but they really want to, because they want the outcomes of it, even though it's kind of frightening, to move from like a controlling puppet master into like a real camaraderie based relationship with leadership team is a big jump.
Yeah.
So, but everybody wants to do it. So I can give them language for the terrain that they're in, and then give language for the bridge into what they want.
Yeah. There's motivation there. There's a
Yeah.
why they're
Yeah.
doing that. And
Right.
if they don't understand the why, then they're not going to want to go there, because the why will be to protect themselves. That's so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So Adrian, we need to have you back to continue this
Let's do it.
conversation.
Let's do it. We're just getting started.
We are just literally getting started. So I feel like this was a teaser, an opener to the next conversation we're going to have, where we're going to be able to dive in when you talk about going from victim to responsible, and all the things that really takes to be the leader, that we're capable of being, and having those conversations, like I know we were talking about before, about recognizing that you're doing certain things wrong, make an assumption that you're doing things wrong somewhere in your organization. There's some things that, and I love what you said there, either I allowed it or I created it myself.
Yeah.
And, and it's getting to that realization. This is where the work really happens. So I'd love to have you back. In the meantime, let's give them some places where they can connect with you. So where would you have them start?
Would love to come back and have a conversation. We call that hugging the cactus. So want to get connected to me? You can follow me on Instagram, adrian.k. We do have, let me give 30 seconds. We do, for folks that are interested in this, even just this little teaser, and when this comes out, if you're interested in this conversation, always feel free to reach out to me. If you want an opportunity to go throw yourself in the deep end, where if you like this, you're probably like that kind of thing. I like the kind of thing. Like, my dad tells a story about me being 4 years old, and he looks up and all of a sudden I'm jumping off the high dive with all the teenage kids. I'm into that. So if you like high dives, if you like the deep end, if you want to like have a spiritual jolt to your leadership, we've got an opportunity that's open to the public. So it doesn't happen very often. It's called the Revenant process, and it's a 4-day personal leadership accelerant. I won't go into it now for the sake of time, but it's breathtaking. And you can go to wearerevenant.com or just DM me and I'll get you connected to everything. Or we have the podcast, the Naked Leadership podcast, where Dan Tocchini, my business partner, and Chad Brown, our other partner who runs marketing for our company, we have conversations about what it takes to lead well, and really the conversations behind the scenes that everyone's in. They just don't know they don't know what conversation they're in, and they don't know how to navigate it and generate it in a way that works for them and a way that makes a difference for the people. So that's Naked Leadership Podcast. So there's a couple ways, but thanks for having me on. Can't wait to have more of the conversation.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I had the opportunity to listen to the Naked Leadership podcast, and there was episode 130 with, his name is Richard Morales. And wow, go listen to that.
Yeah.
That is this just so powerful.
He was a murderer. He was in prison. He was one of the first guys we trained. Now he's out. He has his own organization, just got built into the California budget, I think for 29 million, something like that. Yeah. Anyway,
Incredible.
CROP, CROP, that's their organization. It's breathtaking. Listen to that
Yeah.
episode though. We were all crying. It was great.
Yeah. Just amazing. So, Adrian, thank you. Thank you so much. We're going to make sure all the links that you just mentioned are all going to be in the show notes. And we look
Awesome.
forward to having you back really soon. We'll
Awesome.
schedule that now. And yeah, thanks for listening, everyone who has been tuning in. I love these conversations.
Yeah.
This is the type of conversation, that high dive.
Yeah.
We're going to have more and more of those conversations. So we encourage you to keep tuning in and come back to next time. Until then, have an amazing day, and be willing to ask yourself. I always say, leaders of transformation, take action, take something out of this, and apply it. So in this case, I would say challenge yourself to have the tough conversations with yourself. Ask yourself the question that you haven't been comfortable asking up until now. So what is that question? You may not even know what the question is. Dig into what the question is, because your soul knows, and
right.
And start there. So we look forward to seeing you on another episode really soon. Until then, have a great day.